technology. The great rolling engine of change is reaching its zenith. Are you evolving with it? Energy, uses of sustainable energy resources, and application of clean technologies to promote a green world. Mobility, development of electric power, autonomous vehicles for convenience and safety. Health, initiating the ability of treating patients remotely, ensuring the safety of your loved ones. Work, involvement of efficient and productive industrial opportunities. Education, creating a mutual beneficial atmosphere for both teaching and learning media. Entertainment, invention of powerhouses of entertainment media for a high quality and a high definition experience. IEEE Technometer of Sri Lanka launched the video series Technosapiens, Technology for Humanity. A series of educational videos on dynamic cutting-edge technologies equipped in many industries across the globe. Keep watching, be updated. Stay tuned with us.
Since most problems created by our imagination are thus imaginary, all we need are imaginary solutions. Good evening, everyone. I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you who have joined us today for the webinar on the promising future of natural language processing, organized by the IEEE Technometer of Sri Lanka. I would also like to welcome our speaker for today's event, Professor Gihan V. Sir, we're deeply honored and privileged to have you with us as our guest speaker. To begin with, I am Sharuni Fernando, member of the creative content team of Technometer Sri Lanka, and I will be your moderator for today's session. First and foremost, let me give you a brief introduction about us. What is IEEE? IEEE, also known as the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, is the world's largest technical and professional organization dedicated to advancing technology for the benefit of humanity. IEEE Sri Lanka section is one of the most active sections in Region 10, which follows this motive. So we are the IEEE Technometer of Sri Lanka, which is one of the 4 initiatives which was taken by the IEEE Sri Lanka section Student Activities Committee to empower the youth with technological advancements. This is a venue and a tool for members to network, build valuable professional connections, and develop leadership skills, which are essential for managing careers. Members get the ability to connect with peers and industrial experts and also invest in their future. Over the past 4 years, Technomeetup has brought to you different topics and trends which are related to cutting-edge technologies in the industry. And despite these hard times, we are here to present to you the technological advancements in the world through a virtual platform. I hope that we will be able to enlighten and inspire you with the knowledge through the Techno Journey, which comprises new initiatives such as Technosapiens, the video series, the Tech Innovator, the podcast series, and many, many more. So stay tuned with us on our social media to be updated with these amazing events. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions, thoughts, or doubts during the presentation, please feel free to type them into the Slido link, and I'll be bringing them up during the Q&A session, which will be conducted in the end of the session. So why are we talking about NLP? Because with the increasing amount of text data being generated every single day, NLP will only become more and more important for us to make sense of the data to be used in many other applications. The study of natural language processing has been around for more than 50 years, and with the rise of computers, it has been growing rapidly in the field of linguistics. So today, we are presenting to you the promising future of natural language processing, which will be conducted by none other than Professor Gihan V. And I assume that he's no stranger to many of us, since he has been a well-known figure in the internet world since 1988. In addition to being a professor at the University of Moratuwa, he is the CEO of the LK Domain Registry and an advisor to TechCert. He has earned a BSc in engineering from the University of Moratuwa and a master's and PhD from the University of California. Professor Dias is also the founder and the first president of the Lanka Academic Network, as well as the incumbent president of the Internet Society Sri Lanka chapter. He is currently developing resources, technologies, and tools to allow us use IT in Sinhala and Tamil. And he will be guiding us on the topics in research areas related to NLP, NLP in Sri Lankan context, and also the future trends in NLP. Most often, NLP is considered as a difficult problem in computer science. And some say it's the nature of the human language that makes NLP difficult. Well, I might not be the best person to demystify this topic for you, so let me invite Professor Gihan to enlighten you and take you through the journey of natural language processing. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Sharuni, and thank you very much for inviting me here today. And I'm very glad to see that we have over 120 people here, and I hope that you are here because you have some interest in this topic. Some of you may be, of course, quite expert already, or you might be simply looking at finding out what it is. Right, and I would also like to say, don't hesitate at any point. I will generally be keeping track of people, and you can raise your hand, or if you prefer, just unmute your mic if you want to speak, and then I will generally tend to notice that and ask you to say. So don't feel shy. You can, of course, also send things on the chat, but sometimes I tend to miss things on the chat. So I would prefer if you can just unmute and ask me a question. But if you feel shy or whatever, okay, you can send some chat also. Right. Okay. So let me start my presentation. Right. Okay. Can you see the slide? Okay, I hope you can see the slide. Okay. Okay, I'm not hearing anything, either plus or minus.
Yes, sir, we can see.
Okay, right. Because sometimes it's very difficult to know whether other people can see, because what is shown on my screen and what is shown on your screen are sometimes quite different. Right. Okay. So let's continue. So this is, I've been asked to speak on the promising future of natural language processing, but I will start obviously with the present and give an introduction to what is this whole business. And my slides are bilingual because I was giving this or similar talk earlier to in Sinhala, but today I will generally tend to talk in English, but if you're asking me questions, you are free to ask me in Sinhala as well. And I'm sure if you want to talk in Tamil, somebody will translate it for you. So feel free. I mean, don't feel shy if you don't want to talk in English. Let's look at what is natural language processing. Right? It's a very interesting field because it actually covers two quite different areas, that is computers and human languages. And especially in our country, these are done by two different people. As you know, once you get on to about grade 11 or 10, you have to choose, are you going to do science or arts, or, you know, when you get into the, O level somewhat, but especially when you start to get into the A level. And somehow people in our education system seem to think that if you are doing science or engineering, you don't need to do any thing about language. And if you are doing arts, you don't need to know anything about science and programming and so on, the more technical parts of computing, which is of course very bad, because when you are doing natural language processing, you should both know computing and language. So it's a subfield of linguistics, computer science, and artificial intelligence. And there is also another term called computational linguistics, and I would sort of consider this as somewhere they're both very similar, but the computer science people would tend to use the word natural language processing, and the linguistics people would tend to use the word computational linguistics. But other than that, it's sometimes difficult to figure out what is the difference between these two. So what is NLP? Using computers to process and analyze natural language. And let's see what we mean by natural language. Actually, a better word might be human language, which is spoken by human beings, as opposed to computer languages like Python or Java or C# or whatever that you are using. So they are completely different things, because if you are using, let's say, Python, there is a book which says this is the syntax of Python. Here you have a round bracket, here you have a square bracket, right? Here you have a hash, and here you have a plus sign, whatever it is. You can't change it. But in human languages, people have various ways of doing the same thing, and different people may do different things, and both may say we are correct, right? So it is much more difficult, for example, to really understand a human language than a computer language. This is why any computer today can understand any computer language, right? You have C++, Scala, or any other language, their computer will understand. But if you try to tell it, okay, do you understand English or Chinese or Sinhala or Tamil, then you might find it is more difficult. So what is important, because the computer should understand, and it is very, very difficult. We come up with a few examples in a minute, how whatever is either spoken or written, what it means, what it is. So there are many, many applications of NLP. One would be machine translation, right? I think you all understand that if you have a document in English, but you don't speak English very well, I think that's correct for many of us, right? Many of us, although I'm speaking in English today, it may be possible to, I mean, not possible, I think it is quite likely that many of you are not very familiar with English, right? If you give a document in English, you may be able to understand a little. If you give a document, the same document translated into Sinhala or Tamil, you will understand it better. And this is maybe not so true for you guys, because I think most of you have studied in English for many years, but for the majority of the country, that is 100% true. Then database access. How do you access data in databases? Information retrieval, select from a set of documents. Text categorization. So sometimes this is sometimes called even sentiment analysis, but I think a more general term is text categorization, sorting text into a set of categories. So for example, if I give a document and say, is this a financial document, or is it a document on humanities, or is it a document on computer science? A human being will typically be able to very quickly say, oh, this is something to do with computer science. This is something to do with finance, right? Or maybe arts or humanities, dancing or something like that. We should be able to say that, but computers find it more difficult. Then extracting data from text, then controlling things using spoken language, then spelling, grammar checker. These are just some random things. We'll talk about a few more of these later. So I just want to get some idea. Now, if you take NLP, there are two major parts. The first one is called NLU, or natural language understanding. That is taking some spoken or typed sentences and figuring out, understand the language. Now, this is not really possible because computers today don't really understand language, right? In fact, this has become very philosophical. What do you mean by understand? So philosopher will spend a lot of time trying to explain what is meant by understanding. But what a computer does is really it sort of manages to get some idea about what is in that sentence enough for it to do something with it, right? It might not really understand the way a human being does. Then the second part is natural language generation, which is you take something which is inside a computer, maybe a data structure or something like that, and put it out as either text or speech in a very natural way, right? So if you want a computer to do something and say, okay, can you tell me the, something, it should print it out in a very natural way. So that is called natural language generation. And the input and output of NLP can be either text, right? Either words and sentences which are written down, right? So we have written languages using letters and words. In any language, Sinhala or English or Tamil, we have text. We also have speech. So right now I'm talking to you with a speech, and also I'm showing you slides with speech, right? You could talk to me using your microphone, or you could send me a chat message on the chat box. So both could be possible, both speech and text, and both are parts of NLP, right? So sometimes text is easier than speech because speech is more complicated, but of course speech is also becoming very, very important because it's easier in most cases for us to say something or listen to something with our ears than to type something or to read something on a screen. So what are the steps of natural language understanding, NLU? First is speech, taking speech and taking the sound. So for example, I think I can do it even here, but anyway, as you know, in things like YouTube, you can convert, you can set this up. In fact, let me see if I can enable that here, if that feature is enabled. It doesn't seem to be having this. Okay, it doesn't have to be seem to be having subtitles, but I know that it is possible to have that. If you have seen on YouTube and various places, it will automatically convert your speech into words. Maybe not so well. You may have seen in a place like YouTube, it sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work. And then, of course, the other side of this not understand, this is generation, generating speech, right? That would come under natural language generation. Then syntax, the sentence structure, the nouns, verbs, etc. So I will give you a Sinhala sentence, if you understand Sinhala, right? Lamaya gedara yai, the child goes home. Now, we can take that sentence and try to identify what are the things here. So lamaya, we call it the noun, right? It is a person or a physical thing. Then yai is the verb. It says goyo, right? The child goes home. And where does the child go? To the home, gedara, right? So we can say these are, so we can always call this, the subject is the lamaya, the object is the gedara, and yai is the verb or the predicate. So there are words like that. So syntax tries to identify the different parts of a sentence and figures out what each one is. For example, if you say gedara lamaya, that is a different meaning. In fact, I don't know what that meaning is, but definitely it is not the same meaning as lamaya gedara, right? I go home, or home goes I, or goes the home I. So some of them may not be very grammatical, right? Or it may, but sometimes we may use those things. So those are called syntax. Then semantics is what is the meaning of what you are saying. So let's say I take this English sentence. I saw the moon in my room. Right. What does it mean? Let's take a different thing. I saw the man in my room. What would you imagine that means? That inside my room there was a man. Right? I mean, that probably people would accept that. If I say I saw the moon in my room, then it probably means that I was in the room and the moon was not in the room. It would be very unlikely that the moon was in the room. Right? So this is called semantics. What do you mean by in my room? Is it the I was in my room or the moon was in my room or what? Then there's this famous sentence which Noam Chomsky came up with. Colorless green ideas sleep furiously. Right? If you take this as a syntax, it is quite easy. So what is happening here? Something is sleeping. That is a verb. What is sleeping? Oh, ideas. So ideas are sleeping. So you know it's a verb. Then colorless and green are adjectives which describe ideas. And how does these ideas are sleeping? Furiously. Okay. So grammatically, this sentence has a lot, not grammatically, syntactically, grammatically, this sentence is perfectly meaningful. But if you try to understand what it means, it becomes very difficult, right? So if the idea is green, okay, we could say the idea is green, right? Somehow. But what is colorless green, right? So it becomes difficult to understand. Then what do you mean by ideas sleeping, right? Can ideas sleep? And can ideas sleep furiously, right? So you can have sentences which are very syntactically correct, but meaning wise, they are not very meaningful, right? Or they may have different meanings like the first sentence we looked at. Then the fourth type or step of natural language understanding is pragmatics. Pragmatics basically tries to understand a sentence in the context of something else. Let's say I say, I won't. What does that mean? I won't. Right. So maybe I was invited to give a talk today on natural language processing. I said, I won't. Right. So I was invited to do something. I might reply saying, I won't. But if I don't know, I mean, what is the context of this sentence, I won't, I have no idea what is it that I'm not going to do or whatever it is. Right. So pragmatics really is the meaning of the sentence in the context of not only the other sentences, but the world around us. Right. So if you can say, they saw the moon in the lake. Right. In fact, if you say something like, I went to the university. Right. Let's take another example. I went to the university. Right. Everybody will say that, okay, the syntax is correct. The semantics are correct. I mean, it's quite clear. But what does that mean? Right? Who is this? In fact, let's say something slightly different. He went to the university. Who is this he? Right? Somebody. We don't know who the he is unless something is. The university. Which one is the university? I mean, there are so many universities, right? So unless you know what university we are talking about, we will not know what they mean by the university. Right? And even things like went, we can have different meanings. I mean, how did he go? When did he go? What do you mean by went? Did he just go? Or he went to the university 10 years ago, right? We can say he went to the university, right? We are talking about, let's say, some famous person, right? He say we went to the university, but he has gone, 25 years ago, right? Which is different from him going 2 minutes ago. So as you can see, depending on the context, these words and the meaning of a sentence will change. So that is called pragmatics, right? So we can look at speech, we can look at syntax, semantics, pragmatics, and so on. And probably some more, but let's stop there. Right. Then let's look at a few applications of NLP. Let's look at search. So search is something we are quite familiar with. So let me give a small demo, right? So let's look for the word Colombo. Sorry, I'm on the wrong screen. Let me move this to the other screen. Hold on. Okay, right. So, right. So I asked, what is the capital of Sri Lanka? The current capital of Sri Lanka is Jayawardenepura, and then it gives various things. Of course, it also shows a picture of Colombo. And in fact, capital Colombo, so Jayawardenepura. So actually, this is something where it's not 100%. I mean, Sri Lanka, we have sort of the parliament and so on is in Jayawardenepura, but for many other things, Colombo is the capital. So it's, not, so they give various things about that. So this is searching, and we can also search in other languages. So let me show some more things. Hold on. Right. So I can just maybe search for Colombo, and I can search for something in Sinhala. So I'm going to give example in Sinhala. And so it will then, now here, if I ask Lankawe Aganura Kumakda, it says Sri Lanka Wikipedia, and then something about Facebook, something, and then it gives some videos about Sri Lanka. So the difference, as you can see, is if you search in English, it actually gives you an idea. In fact, if you look here, it says Sri Jayawardenepura. In fact, I typed in English, but it decided, since I have set my language preferences, to give me an answer in Sinhala, right? And it gives a map, and it tries to, and I don't know, it shows a picture of something. I'm not sure what that thing is. Anyway, but if I ask the same question in Sinhala, it does not understand. Can you see? It just looks at words like Lankava, Aganura, and so on, and tries to give some ideas, some results. So this shows the power of NLP, which Google has applied in English, because it understands the word capital and it sees I am asking a question. I mean, if I want to, I could have put a question mark, but it's not even needed since I'm starting with the word what. And then it gives the answer almost straight away. Of course, it gives the answer in English, in Sinhala, but I could set it to give it in English also. And but in Sinhala, you can see it is much less. The reason is Google hasn't really put in that amount of resources and effort to do this proper language understanding for Sinhala. Now, one of these days they might, but right now you can see there's a huge difference between the nice way they do English query and the fairly primitive way. This is the same way they did English maybe 10 years ago, right? But for Sinhala, that is all they do. Right. So early search engines, so let me close this. Early search engines look for documents matching the words in the search query. And as I said, in Sinhala, that's really what it does even today. But current search engines try to understand the query and return an answer, a meaningful answer. In fact, if you can go to Google or any other search engine and try some fairly complicated questions, sometimes they are very smart in figuring out what your answer, what you are looking for, and give the correct answer. Sometimes they are completely wrong and give a completely meaningless or irrelevant answer. Then another thing we can do is compare documents or look for similar documents, right? Very often we want, for example, if you have an academic paper, you might want to find what are the other papers which are similar to that. So if you are using this Turnitin thing, you will know that what it does is it will check to see if you have similar taken things from some other thing. So it looks for similar documents on the web. And there are many other things where you can do document comparison. Then summarization is to distill a piece of text to a short segment. This is something very useful because you might not want to read something pages and pages. You want the computer to say, can you tell me what is written here? What is this whole document in a very short and brief way? That's called summarization. Then text correction, like spell checking, right? Spelling checking is well known. In fact, I hope that whenever you write something, you enable the spelling checker, as also the grammar checker in like Microsoft Word or Google Docs or whatever. That is now something which has been there for a long time. It's a very simple but also quite a sophisticated application of NLP. Then grammar and style. So grammar checking became possible, or in sense became really usable only a few years ago. Even if you take an older version of Microsoft Word, like Word, whatever the 2010 or whatever the old version was, you will find the grammar checker for English is fairly poor. Now, I would say it is quite good. Google Docs, if you have enabled grammar checking, right, it actually gives you very good, it marks if you make a mistake in grammar. Now, for Sinhala and Tamil, it's not so good, but still, there are some, spelling checkers we have. So Microsoft has one, and then we have developed one at Moratua, and so on. So these are some of the things you can do. Then, of course, translation is to convert from one language to the other. As I said, it's very important, especially in countries like Sri Lanka, where the majority of the population don't understand a major world language like English. But it's important for anybody because whatever language you speak, there are many people who speak other languages, right? So, and so let me again do a small example of that. Right, so here I have actually done it, and I'll just show you the screen. So hopefully you can see this, so I'll make it a bit bigger. Right. So this is the system which we call CETA, standing for Sinhala and Tamil, but it also handles English, where we have developed a system to convert from Sinhala to English to Tamil to basically those three languages. So we have given it some news item in Sinhala, and it has translated that to English, right? Or we could give it something in English and ask it to translate to Sinhala or Tamil. And of course, there are things like Google Translate, which handles hundreds of languages. So this is very useful because many people need to get things translated. So this system is something we have developed at University of Moratua, and hopefully this will be available for people to use. In fact, there is a basic version of it available even right now, but this particular version, it's an internal thing, so it's not available for the public, but it's there for us to, we've been using it. Right. Then what is sentiment analysis? So when somebody says, oh, I really want to see that, say it's a movie or something, does that mean they likes it or not, right? Or somebody could say, oh, don't buy that, let's say, computer, it is difficult to use, right? Or you say, oh, don't do this, don't go there, that's a dangerous country, don't go to that country. So you can see whether people, what they're saying is something good or bad, or what actually people mean. As I said earlier, this is part of classification, where we try to take a piece of text and try to understand, break it up into several classifications. So let me also try to give you a small example of that. So I will show you also our NLP tools website. So this is something we have done. There are others also, but I will just show you what we have done. So we have various things, but I will show you the right, which is the sentiment analysis. Right, so I will get it to that, and let's say, okay, let's try to take the same example, which was here. See if this works. It might take a few seconds. Okay, so basically this looks at all the words here and then tries to find if they are positive or negative or neutral. So that is part of sentiment analysis. I will come back to that in a moment. And then we can have business intelligence, which is basically now a lot of companies and in fact even individuals want their computer to make sense of everything in the world around and tell them the best thing to do. So for example, if let's say, well, most of you I think are at the university, but let's say, okay, you have graduated and or you're about to graduate and you're looking for a job. So the question I might ask is, what companies should I join? What organization should I join? And there is no real answer to that, but a computer may search a lot of things and look at your qualifications and what are the companies, and they might say, oh, you know, for what you are interested in, what you have done, this might be the good company. Of course, the other direction, it is very, very common for, let's say a company wants to recruit somebody and they get so many applicants, they will use a computer to search through those and find out or try to identify who are the best candidates for that particular job. Right, so let's see if that cat has worked. Okay, what is it doing? Okay, sorry, no, it worked for some reason. Oh, it didn't work. So it has looked at these and tries to get something. So this one is basically a neutral score because there is, you know, nothing much there. But let's try to find slightly more some other thing. Let's see what it tries to see. Okay, so this just some news items, so don't worry about the topic, right? Because I want to take something which maybe had been some negative connotations, right? Okay, so here also it is, I hope you can read this, you can see this, I will make it a bit bigger. So it's a news item, so don't get upset if about the topic, but anyway, so Atavareta, Polisiate, so Polisiate is supposed to be negative, right? Interesting. Naduwa, those are considered to be negative words, and for some reason Ati is a positive word and others have been marked as neutral. So it has been, so in this particular case, it is marking this as mostly neutral. Of course, if you read the thing, it's about some somebody being accused of sexual harassment. So I would consider that to be a negative thing. But as you can see, maybe this the thing itself maybe didn't really figure out about the negativeness of this. But anyway, also it depends on, you know, maybe you can say it's not negative in some senses, right? But whatever, right? So as you can see, like that, we can do many things. So I just gave you a few examples, and this can be done also for business intelligence, where you give it a lot of data and say, try to tell me what is important in this data. And this is something which is going to make a lot of money for companies if they can do it properly, and also a lot of money for data science people who can then help companies to make sense of all the data they have. And a lot of companies, in fact, every single company has lots and lots of data. Government has lots of data which they are doing absolutely nothing with, right? And if they can do even 5% or 10% or something with it, they might make a lot of money. Then another very important thing are what are called dialogue systems, where a human and a computer can converse with one another using either text or speech. And this is another very, very important area in NLP, where people can talk to a computer, or sometimes two computers can talk to each other. So talk could either mean speech, but sometimes speech is still a bit difficult for computers to understand. But as you know, you can talk to Google, talk to Siri, or whatever it is, and it will answer you then and there. So that is both natural language understanding and natural language generation. or you can type. So in a way, the Google search I just showed you is a type of human to computer dialogue system, but there are many others where you can ask questions and the computer will try to understand what you are asking and give an answer. Again, today's systems are fairly primitive, but I think in the next few years, you will find that they become more and more sophisticated when they are doing not only like syntax and semantics. So today they are sort of looking at syntax and so on. Once it goes to pragmatics and it tries to figure out, what, where you are. Even right now Google search is knows where you are. So if you say, show me restaurants near me, it figures out where you are and then shows restaurants. In fact, let's just try that. Let's just type here. Let's see how it works. Is the spelling correct? Let's see how good it is. Okay, so it did figure out I am somewhere near Dehiwala, right? It showed a map somewhere here, and it is showing some things. Interestingly, I actually run this in Microsoft Bing. So let me go to Google and run the thing, and let's see what it says. There, of course, at least it had, it knew me where I am much better. So Google knows where you are, right? Don't worry about it. Google knows where you are at all times. Or just throw your phone into the sea if you don't like that to happen. So it shows some other things which are near my current location in Mount Lavinia, right? So actually Google is much better than Microsoft on that particular thing, right? And so this has now become, although I just ran it into a search engine, it has become a dialogue system because I asked it a question. I mean, I didn't ask it, if I wanted, I could have said, what are the restaurants near me, but not necessary. And it actually understood what I was saying, understood what you mean by near me, and gave some answers which might be good, right? So, and these are going to get better and better, and especially again in our own languages, there is a lot of work to be done. So if any of you are interested, this is a very good area for you to get into, and even in under NLP, into dialogue systems. And there are many types of dialogue systems. Although we have only just written one paragraph, you can talk about a lot of stuff under dialogue system. Then there could be other applications, text to speech, OCR, or optical character recognition, speech recognition, and many others. In fact, you can have an infinite number of applications. Right. So we also need various resources in order to do this. So I will briefly look at some of the things we have been doing. We have been developing something called Corpora. Corpora are a set of text. So English text, Sinhala text, and then bilingual text, which are same in two languages, which we need for our machine translation system, because it all learns from bi and trilingual corpora. By the way, I will talk about that later, right? And there are many tools we have developed. So one interesting thing I'll show you in a moment is called the language.lk portal. Then we have done fonts, dictionaries and glossaries, applications, standards, font converters, spelling checkers. So I have shown you some of these, and some of them are there. Some of them are things which we need to develop as well. So one of the things we have done, which I would like you, if you're interested in this area, is to go to this website, language.lk. And that has a lot of things. And in fact, if you want to do more, you can certainly help. It's in all three languages. I'm showing you the Sinhala version, but you can access this in English and Tamil as well. Then I will just talk about a few of the research projects which either we have been doing or can be done. Or in fact, in all of these, just because we have done something doesn't mean we have finished. There's a lot more. So we are looking in our NLP center at the University of Moratuwa. We are one of our main projects, not that's the only thing we are doing, but our main project, which we have been doing for the last 3 years, or actually last 5 years more, is to develop a translation between our languages. And the reason we did that was especially when we started in about 2015, the available tools were very poor for Sinhala and Tamil. And of course, they have improved quite a lot in the last few years. But at the same time, we have found that they are still not good enough and we want to make them even better. Then various types of language resources, as I mentioned, monolingual corpora, that is text in one language, because you need, for computers to understand language, they need language. So if you just say, okay, can you understand Sinhala? It will say, yes, I could try to do that, but give me a lot of Sinhala text so that I can try to understand what is this Sinhala. So we need to do that. So Google has trained its BERT language model with, now I can't remember the exact number, but anyway, many billions of sentences, right? Billions and billions of sentences in English. They have also got something in Sinhala, but of course only about 500,000 sentences in Sinhala, so much less. Then there is this part of speech tagged corpora, that is text tagged with whether it's a noun or a verb or adjective or whatever, so that helps the systems to understand things better. We need a word net. A word net gives the meanings or the relationship, between words. So for example, if you say a dog, then it could say a dog is a type of animal. And then it could say Alsatian is a type of dog. And they could say, okay, let's say I have a dog called Rover or something, right? Or Bindu or whatever it is. You can say Bindu is an example, is a instance of dog, right? So it's not a type of dog, it's just one example of a dog. So those are what word nets do. Then dictionaries and thesaurus. Thesaurus is a capital, the plural. Thesaurus is a singular. Gives similar or synonyms of words. So right now we don't have a thesaurus for Sinhala. Finally, a group is working on something which will include a thesaurus. Then glossaries is for some technical terms. Gazetteers means lists of places and institutes and various things. Then stop word list, paraphrases. So that is how you can make a long, different ways of writing the same thing. That's quite often very important because people could say different words when they mean the same thing. Centi-word list, whether things are positive or negative, and various data sets. So then things like the actual tag sets we use, the morphology. So a couple of our undergraduates and postgraduates and some of our linguists have worked very hard on building this Sinhala and Tamil morphology. So I should have explained what we mean by morphology. Morphology is how words change. Tapi kiwot lamaya kiyala, lamaya, lamayaata, lamayage, lamayagen. We can have various versions of that word. In English, it's not so much, right? But we can say house, houses, right? Man, men. So the words change depending on, say, plural and so on. But in English, there is not a lot of morphology, but in Sinhala and Tamil, we have a lot of morphology. So we have developed some morphological analyzers for Sinhala and separately for Tamil. Then grammar, phonetics, these are things which are doing. So one of the problems is that we don't have billions and billions of sentences or words in our languages. So for Sinhala, as I said, we can find more, but Google has used about 500,000 sentences for Sinhala and maybe I think 3 or 4 million for Tamil. But that is very, very small. So one of the things is we need to get more data, and also we need to figure out how can we do better with a small amount of data. That's another area we are looking at. Then various statistical techniques, and then machine learning and deep learning. Now, I'm not going to make this into a talk on deep learning because I'm sure, I don't know, you have already had one, or I'm sure you will have if not. But deep learning, right? So what is deep learning? Maybe I'll just very briefly explain, although I don't have a slide on that. Is using computers, you give it a lot of data and the computer tries to find out or be able to predict or to give output based on that data. So the whole idea of deep learning is you give it a lot of data, and then typically we use this technique called a neural network. Again, I don't want to go into details, which takes all this data and converts it into something called a neural network model. And then if you give it some input to that model, it will give some output. So this machine translation I just showed you a bit earlier, right? Let me show that again, maybe, since it is already here. Right. So this uses deep learning. In fact, it uses a model developed by Facebook, but we have trained it with Sinhala and Tamil data. So it knows, for example, that Pahasreniya, right, can be translated into grade 5, right? And in fact, it knows that the 5 has to go to the right of the grade, but in Sinhala, it is Pahasreniya, right? And in fact, the dates also you can see it has correctly converted. So this is a lot of things you do by training. You take the thing that, okay, if you see this, in other language, it is that. So this is of course for translation, but for any other kind of deep learning, that's what you do. Give it a lot of data. It trains a model, and the model is just a whole lot of numbers, right? It's, you know, sometimes so many gigabytes worth of numbers. And then that number, that model can be used to give an output given some particular input. So that is all I'm going to really talk about deep learning. It's a very, very important area. If you haven't heard of it, I would be very surprised. You are all being IEEE members, or most of you are, I guess, IEEE members. But I would really advise all of you to at least get a basic understanding about machine learning and deep learning, not only for NLP, but it is used in many, many other areas as well. And it's become very important in NLP also. Then language tools, these are tools which do all sorts of things. Then applications like translators, spelling checkers, grammar checkers, OCR, text-to-speech, speech recognition, sentiment analyzers, summarizer. I showed you a few of them, and there are many others. Then user resources like fonts, style guides, and so on. Then I just want to, I think I sort of gave some information about us, our NLP Center at the University of Monaco, and it's our logo which you see at the bottom there. So we basically concentrate on 4 areas. Translation, it talked about. Computation linguistics, that is to understand how our languages, especially Sinhala and Tamil, work. Information retrieval, how do we get information from the web or some other place and get what we want. And then finally, speech processing, how do we, so the first 3 are basically we are dealing with text, and the last one, of course, with speech. So we develop all of these, and we need your expertise. So if you are interested in any of these areas, please do contact me and say you are interested in this, and we would be happy to have you work with us. We'd be we are willing to get people who are interested in this area and want to work with us. Okay, thank you very much. So I will stop there for now. Good, 1945 minutes. So we will use the rest of the time for discussion.
Thank you, Professor, for that very informative and interesting session, which I certainly think have given us, the NLP enthusiasts, a clear and precise understanding regarding this field. Now, with this valuable knowledge being shared, I think you all might have your own questions waiting to be answered by Professor Gihan. So let's move to our Q&A session. Moving on to our Slido, we have several questions. Let me start with the first one. What are the word nets and NLP libraries like NLTK for Python available for the Sinhala language processing, and how accurate are those?
Okay, right. So let me try to answer that. So let me stop sharing. If I need, I can always share something again. Okay, right. No, sorry. Oh, no, I have stopped sharing. Wait, okay, that's fine. Yeah, tools for Sinhala. Now, this is an area where we don't have a lot. So I can't remember what you asked for. I think NLTK, there is some Sinhala part in that. You can get it from, I think it's included in NLTK, or maybe it's in a separate repository, but it's there. Other than that, I don't know if there is a lot of well-known tools. So we have some spelling checkers. We are working on some language models, but I wouldn't say we have anything very fantastic. What were the other things? Can you just read the question again?
What are the word nets?
What was that? WordNet. So WordNet, yeah. So WordNet is something which would be very nice to have. There was several years ago, maybe about 8 or 9 years ago, we sort of tried to do something, but it didn't really finish and it's not available right now. So this is area somebody could use, right? Somebody could work on and develop a WordNet. So right now, I believe we don't have a WordNet for Sinhala.
Thank you, Professor. I hope that answered your question. Then we have another question. There are many accents in the world, sometimes to the same language. How does NLP tackle these accents?
Right. So I would say it's a very difficult task. So in fact, not only accent, so accent would be for spoken language, but even written language, right? Especially if you have heard some Indians talking, sometimes they use words, they talk in English, but they use words which we are not familiar with. For example, instead of saying canteen, they might say tuck shop, right? It's not very common here. I think maybe we used to have that some time ago, but they still use it. And I think, yeah, they also use the word mess, right? I think I went to Indian University and said, okay, we'll go to the mess for lunch. So I was wondering why they are going to some mess, but it turns out it's a canteen. So like that, there are different words which people use in different countries. So it's not only the accent, but the accent is another issue. So for most things, we need to train our systems with the accents people use. So one of the biggest problems is if you have used something like Siri or Google Assistant or Alexa, you have to learn an American accent, right? So if you don't talk to it in American accent, it doesn't find it difficult to understand. So some people really have learned to speak with American accent simply for talking to their Google or the Amazon or whatever. But if you train it with people with our accent, it will learn that as well, right? So that's really not an issue, but it's training data. I mean, they have, especially some time ago, now they are much better. They are having more things in it, because if you look at it, there are actually more people speaking English in South Asia, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, right? Although they have their own languages, a lot of people speak English. Then there are people speaking English in England, right? So England, there's only about 50 million people, but there are many more English speakers in the Indian subcontinent than that. So if they only are able to handle English and even English, in fact, you know, you have sometimes listened to these cricketers and all speaking. Some of them are very clear. Some of them you can't understand what they're saying because they are from Liverpool or Manchester or something, and we don't understand. Yeah, so accents, big issue. Yes, a lot of things cannot understand accent, can be solved very easily by training it with more data.
Okay, thank you, sir. There's another question. How does NLP handle the task of converting abusive language? Does it convert it to more formal written language or use the same context?
Okay, I have not heard of anybody converting abusive language, but there is a lot of work on detecting abusive language. In fact, one of our former students, Tharinder Ranasinghe, who is now in England, he is working on a PhD in that area. And I think many other people also doing that. So abusive language detection is certainly an area. I have not really heard of anybody trying to convert it into polite language. I suppose it could be possible, right? May, you know, if somebody, you know, says that bloody fool has done something, you can say that person, I mean, I suppose you can think of converting not nice words into nice words. But there is another very interesting area I'll mention, although that's not the question, is computers generating abusive language. So there is a thing called GPT, can't remember exactly what it stands for. It's a text generation thing. So if you give it something, it tries to generate some more text similar to that. Or if you ask a question, it might give an answer. Originally, the first version of GPT was sometimes generating very, very bad or very poor, well, very abusive and racist and, sometimes obscene language. Then they quickly removed that and came up with a newer version where, in fact, if you look carefully, a lot of these training systems have a special module which removes abusive language. There is a list called list of offensive words or something. I can't remember the exact name. And if it sees any of those words in that, it removes it. You can search for it, and I just looked at it. And some of the words there or the phrases there are incredible, right? You wouldn't imagine how people would come up with those. Yeah, if you want to be surprised, go and have a look at that list of offensive words or something like that. So yeah, so people try to remove them, and so the new machine translation or text generation or whatever systems are specifically trained to avoid abusive language. But I have not, well, I'm sure somebody has done it, but I'm not really aware of people who are trying to convert abusive language into polite language. I'm sure it can be done. It's like basically a machine translation exercise.
Yeah. So I hope that answered the question. We can do more research on it. Then we have another question. What are the opportunities available in NLP as a job? What is the social gain that we can have in NLP?
Okay, so two completely different questions. The first question, NLP as a job, I would say huge amount of opportunities, right? This is a very, very rapidly expanding or rapidly very interesting area, and many things are there in it, both in Sri Lanka and anywhere else. If you just go to, Glassdoor or any of these job things and, look for NLP or natural language or whatever jobs, you will find plenty. And even in Sri Lanka, because this is a very new field and is growing, if you take any of these big software companies, Cogen, or well, I don't want to mention any specific names, but many of them are certainly looking at or looking for, not at, recruiting people who have NLP background. So I would say if you have NLP on your CV, together probably with deep learning, you would have a very, very good chance of getting a job. Then the other question was something about social importance. Yes, this is very, very important. In fact, this is how we started our project, translation from Sinhala to Tamil and so on. Because if we don't understand each other, right, we tend to misunderstand, or we think people are doing other things. But if we can understand each other, we can speak to each other, we tend to work well. And also, if you look at the world's knowledge, right, most of the world's knowledge is written in English, right, not any other language, not even Hindi or French or Chinese. So if we are to access that world knowledge, we need to access that. And so some people say, oh yeah, so everybody in Sri Lanka should learn English. Very good idea, right? I don't have any objection to everybody in Sri Lanka learning English. But as you know, I mean, you all are very lucky people, very special people who understand English. And even you, I think many of us, right, will say that, yes, we can understand English, but we are more comfortable in our own language. So we need, if we can have whatever is there in English also be there. For example, we don't have a Siri in Sinhala, right? We don't have a Alexa in Sinhala or Tamil. I don't think so, unless they put one out recently. So there is a lot of things, social good, by making the world's knowledge and available to people in our own language. So I would say it's a very, very important area for social good as well.
Thank you, sir. I think the next question is somewhat related. How far are we in Sri Lanka in terms of having our own virtual assistant who can understand and speak Sinhala?
Right, I think I already answered that with the previous one. I would say very much at the beginning. And whenever something is very much at the beginning, that also comes in the other direction of it's a big opportunity for you. So you do it, right? Whoever asked the question, you do it. You start a project and figure out there's various toolkits available. Google has one, Amazon has one, various people have. Use it, right? And they're open source ones also, and try to build a basic voice assistant, and then maybe you can improve it and maybe you can sell it, right? There is actually something which I think Sampath Bank was trying out. I don't know whether it's actually working or not. And I know a lot of the local companies like Dialog were very much interested in this. But whether anything is actually running, I'm not very sure. But certainly it is something which has a huge commercial potential, right? If you have one which is properly working, many companies who deal with the customer service, they will come running to you and say they want it. So if you have a startup, please do that.
Thank you, sir, for elaborating on that. We have another question. Is there a way to get a singular language data set for a project? The project
yes.
given, for as example, is developing a singular virtual assistant based on machine learning.
Yeah, so there is data. We have data. There is also other data available at University of Colombo, and well, there are also international data. So there are Google has some, Facebook has. I mean, there is a lot of data available. So please contact me. My email address I gave earlier, or somebody can type it into the chat box. And so contact me and then tell me exactly what you want, and we should be able to see. I mean, I don't say we will have exactly the data you need, but we might be able to help you with some data which you can maybe annotate or whatever to do what you want.
Thank you, sir. So you can reach out to Professor Gihan regarding that. The next question is there any specific tools or models for tokenization and lemmatization purposes for emotional analysis of Tamil text?
Okay, I don't know about emotional analysis, but there are lemmatizers and tokenizers available. So we have this Tamilimorph, which is in our site nlp-tools.um.lk. It's actually morphological analyzer, but as part of that, it does do lemmatization. What are the thing? Lemmatization. What's the other one? There is tokenization. Tokenization, yeah, there are enough. So you can find tokenization. I think NLTK also has some, and whatever. That's not a big deal. I don't know about emotional analysis. I think that's maybe your specific project. So yeah, if you want, and then that. So search, I mean, now today we have Google, so you can search for anything. Sometimes what you ask me, because I also know only few things which I know, and there's like 100 things I don't know. For one thing I know. So if you search on Google, I'm sure you will find. So type for Tamil telematizer, Tamil tokenizer, and I'm sure you'll find something.
Yeah, thank you, sir. The next question is, what are the best courses available for NLP and deep learning? What are the higher studies opportunities in NLP for doctoral studies?
Right. So first of all, courses. So there are places like Coursera and then edX, which is the MIT Harvard thing. All of them have NLP courses. So one well-known course, which I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people have done, is this NLP specialization, natural language specialization, done by deeplearning.ai, I think, which is nothing very well. I mean, it's a slightly outdated now, but that's okay. You learn the basics very well. There are 4 courses with about 4 or 5 videos each. So in like about 4 weeks, you should be able to finish that. That's a well-known course. I wouldn't say it's a best, but there are other courses available both on Coursera. So this one is on Coursera. You can go to Coursera. Then you can go to edX, edx.edu, edx.edu. That also has some courses, or you just search, and YouTube is a good place. You go to YouTube and search for whatever you like. I'm sure you'll find a video, in fact, more than one video on whatever you want. Yeah, so there are many courses. Then the other one was higher studies. Yes, so NLP is an area which many universities all around the world are specializing in. So I mean, I can't give you a list. There's probably at least 100 good ones and probably some more. But what I would say is, so NLP itself is a big field. Don't just say I want to do NLP. Try to identify one area within NLP that you want to do and focus on that, and then look for people. And generally, any place, if you want to, them to take you seriously, of course, you should have good results in your exams. That's also needed. But do some research and write a paper on that, right? So if you have a paper accepted, especially at like a IEEE conference, then it would be quite, they would probably take you a bit more seriously than if you just say, I haven't done anything, or I have just done something and, as a hobby. So yes, there is a lot of opportunities for postgraduate study in NLP as well.
Thank you, sir. So I think this would be our last question for today. Is there any research going on to develop tools to identify the mentality of a person by NLP?
Oh, yes, I think there are some things. So somebody mentioned emotion. I think this is somewhere in the same area. Yeah, there are a lot of things looking at sentiment, right? What do people mean when they say something, and also something on emotion. I don't know what you mean by mentality. But yes, and there's also this psychology type of things where maybe you try to understand, some, I mean, for say psychologists could try to understand, from what people say or the answers they give to questions, their psychological profile or something that comes under medical diagnostics. So yes, I think there is some things in that area, but yeah, so probably the most developed part is the sentiment analysis, where they try to find out what you mean. There have been some work, and somebody mentioned today also, about emotions. And then under the sort of medical diagnosis area, we could look at some psychology related things, but that you'll have to ask psychologists, how to do that. I wouldn't advise you to try to do it by yourself, because you might, come up with some weird things which are not relevant or not valid.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So since time is running out, we will be concluding the Q&A session from here. So I hope you all had a wonderful session with so much knowledge being shared. And let me take this opportunity to thank Professor Gihan for humbly accepting our invitation despite his busy schedules, and for sharing with us invaluable knowledge on the topic of natural language processing. Sir, please accept this digital token of appreciation for your contribution towards making this event a very successful and memorable one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you again. This is for our participants. Please feel free to fill the feedback form of the event, which we have shared now, because your feedback helps us improve in our future endeavors. Before proceeding, I would like to remind you of our next big event happening on the 29th this month in collaboration with EdScale on the topic Beyond the Terrestrial. This is a discussion session which would be on the myriad paths of human interfacing for space missions, conducted via Zoom with the presence of Mr. George Salazar, who is a human computing interface technical discipline lead at NASA. So remember the date, it's 29 July from 6:30 p.m. onwards via Zoom. We will be publishing the registration link through the Zoom chat right now. And further, we will be publishing all the information through our social media as well. So hope to see you all there as well.